In this tutorial, we will look at some simple tools to increase the operating efficiency of Windows 7 installation and remove unnecessary or temporary files. We'll be looking at disk cleanup, disk check, some third-party tools CCleaner and anti-malware, as well as defragment and Microsoft config. So first and foremost, we'll look at disk cleanup. Disk cleanup can be accessed two different ways: from the Start and Computer, Start and All Programs. So first of all, Start and All Programs is looked at through Start, Accessories, System Tools, and under here we will see our disk cleanup, defrag, which we'll use later in the tutorial. So first of all, the Start and Computer option. We select the drive that is in question. In this instance, it's the one and only system drive. So we'll right click on the C drive and select Properties. From the first menu we can look at free space, etc. And naturally this is where we'd look at doing a cleanup. So when we hit this disk cleanup option, the first thing that happens is the system analyzes what is applicable to be cleaned. It looks at what can be removed. So in this option, depending on how long it's been or if you've ever run a cleanup, you'll receive a few different selections. In this particular instance, we've only run a clean recently, so we will only see a few different things in this tick window. So cleaning up the disk removes things such as temporary files, cookies, thumbnails, caches, web logs, crash error history reports, etc. Things like the thumbnail cache is when we visit a folder with lots of images and it provides a thumbnail of all of those images. It caches that so the next time we open that folder, all of those images will be able to display quickly. However, this can take up room on the computer's drive and would be considered bogged down or unnecessary usage within the system. So other things like the recycle bin, temporary internet files and stuff will be removed here. So as I said, depending on how long since you've had a clean or what is needed for a clean will be displayed in this window. So in this instance, downloaded files, temporary files, recycle bin are all selected. You might have more such as application crash logs or system crash logs or other text files or other temporary update files. And basically anything listed here has been analysed as being applicable to be able to remove as it's temporary or unnecessary, and so it's safe to assume that we could remove it here. So once I have clicked on the cleanup here and it's done the analysation, we can click OK. I'll be prompted to ask if I'd like to permanently delete these files. As I said, anything that has been analysed is generally safe to remove, so we click on delete files. It will then go ahead and execute that cleanup and remove all of these files. And basically having all of these files on the disk, all this temporary junk, basically just fills up the disk and creates unnecessary usage where it need not be. If we want to look at cleaning up system files as well, we click the other button there, which is clean up system files. And that'll go ahead and analyse all the system files too. Things like service pack halfway through updates, crash files, all that sort of stuff. All the backup files, restoration points, things like that can all be cleaned up from cleaning the system files. So while that calculates up over here, we can sort of have a look at the things it's doing. It's looking at the Windows update. If there's any half downloaded updates now, it'll go ahead and clean them. But we can look at the alternative tool to the disk cleanup, which is built into the operating system. So that is CCleaner. CCleaner is developed by Piriform. It's 3, it's very old, it's very trusted, it's very recommended. It essentially does the same things as disk cleanup does. You can see here in all these recent documents, recent files, thumbnail cache, etc. But it does go into a bit more in depth and analyzes what you have installed because it is a third-party tool versus the Microsoft tool, which will only look at the Microsoft side of things. So once you launch this program, you can just launch the run cleaner. That'll go through, and much the same as our disk analyzing, it'll just analyze what needs to be done and go ahead and clean that. So we can see there's 264 that the system utility missed. We can also choose to clean our registry. Now the Windows registry is the tree or reference structure that Microsoft Windows actually runs off. So all of your entries for software or configurations live in the registry. So when you install a piece of software, you get a whole bunch of additions in the registry that basically tells the software how to run, etc. Now consistently the computer needs to reference that registry to determine how to behave. And so if it's filled up with things that may develop over time, such as contradiction, multiple registry keys that is, missing registry keys or unnecessary unused registry keys, when software or the operating system does reference this registry to determine how to behave, it's got to take a bit longer because it has to go through some records that it doesn't need to go through. So we can scan for these issues here, and as we've only recently done one, we may only have a few issues in this instance. Unused file extension for old software, unused fonts, things like that. We can allow that to run, and once it's finished assessing what is unnecessary or what is a contradiction or what is unused in the registry, we can fix those issues. So we just click on the fix issues and fix all of those. There's only 8. There can be up 500, 1000, 2000, depending on how long it's been run, is how long since there'll be any files. So that's the third-party tool that essentially does the exact same thing. So now we've looked at system files. We can see because we've run recently, there is not much to remove, but downloaded programs, service pack backup files, temporary files, and update cleaners all there. So we can go ahead and hit OK now, and that will delete those files. I wouldn't recommend doing this if you've only just installed new software or something like that. In case you need to revert back to old updates, cleaning up may remove some of the stuff we need. So you would essentially run the cleanup if your computer's running slow or there's inconsistencies. So once the disk is all clean, we either use the inbuilt tool or CCleaner. We can move on to a disk check. A disk check can be found in that exact same location as both. As I said, from Start, Programs, Accessories, and looking at System Tools, we can see that we can go to a defrag there, or a disk check. But we'll do it the same way as we did the other, which is Start Computer, clicking on the disk in question, Properties, looking at the tools there, and we can see the check option. It can also be accessed through a command prompt, which I'll show you in just a minute. Clicking on the Check Now option brings up the dialog allowing us to run the check. You'll notice in this section it also has the ability to scan for and attempt recovery of bad sectors. So we would check the disk if we notice inconsistencies, and inconsistencies can be things such as running slow, not booting, software not running properly. Inconsistencies can be caused by missing system files, moved data, or a bad partition table which doesn't exactly know where the data is. So when we run this tool, we can actually tell it to scan for and attempt the recovery of bad sectors. Sector could be the boot sector, and that could have incorrect file permissions or something like that. So what it's going to do is look at that sector, see what's wrong with it, and try and repair it as best it knows back to factory settings by replacing system files, operating system files, where they should be or where they're missing. Now, because this is the disk that we are booted off or currently operating from, when I hit start here, we'll notice that it actually says it can't check the disk because it's in use. Naturally, it can't provide resources where they're already being used. And so what we do is click the schedule disk check. The schedule allows us to say next on the computer's starting up, and we're not already in the operating system, we can choose to check the disk for errors. So as I said, there's a second way to access that, and we can do that from the command prompt. Now we can run the command prompt a few different ways. We could simply press Command and R, which will bring up the run dialog. From here we can run a few different things. You'll see another one in a minute. We could choose CMD, which for the command prompt. Hit OK and it would launch that for us. As I know, this needs to be an elevated command because we're making an administrative change. We do need to run it with elevated permissions. So to do that, we just type in Command in the Start menu, right click and run as administrator. It'll say, do you want to do this? We do. So from here, this is just the text way to do the disk check. You would use this in the instance of being in a recovery petition or booted off someone's installation disk trying to repair their operating system. The command window is in there to be used. So from here we type chkdsk.exe check disk.executable /r for run. Now, much the same as before, it's going to tell us that it cannot lock the current drive because it's in use. And would you like to do it next time the system restarts? We'll choose yes here, just to ensure that it is scheduled in. And it will then inform us that it will be done the next time the machine starts. So that's doing a check, and the check, as I said, checks for inconsistencies, missing files, or corrupt files. Once that's done, and we've cleaned up the disk and then checked it for errors, if we're still noticing some problems, there are a few more tools we can use. The first is searching for malware. Malware is software that isn't necessarily considered malicious in that it's going to damage the machine, but it is undesirable in that it performs actions we might want to choose not to occur. Things such as collecting data about us through cookies or software, producing pop-ups in our internet browsing session, and collecting information about banking, etc. Stuff like that. That might not necessarily be detrimental, but might cause inconsistencies and frustrations. Now, I'll stress here, when we first open up the software, we always get a database version. With antivirus or malware, the thing is that it's being produced quite regularly. People are updating it all the time. People are creating new malware, new viruses. Now, our database gives the computer the knowledge as to what is a virus. And because this is being released so often, new viruses are being released so often, if we don't update our database when the computer performs a scan for malware or virus, it doesn't know how to define what is malware or virus if it's not been updated. So it's important to keep it updated so that it can determine exactly what it needs to remove. So once that's launched, we just hit the Scan Now button. That'll go through all the general folders, or most of the folders whereabouts a malware or a virus or a cookie could be stored, and just scan every single little file and folder and then give us the option to remove at the end. This can take 10 to 15 minutes depending on how much you have on your machine. We can also do this manually by looking at Start, Programs and Features, and seeing what's installed on the machine. When we look through this list of what's installed with the confidence to know what should be there, we can generally determine something that is malicious or something that looks out of the ordinary. So we'll look through all of these programs, and say I see something, Logitech Vid, if they had a strange name, I would know, hold on, that's a bit suspicious. Maybe do a Google search and find out whether or not it needs to be there. And it could be that it is malware or a virus, but we know in this instance we've looked through and everything's there. And Malwarebytes is automatically doing that for us. We could also look where it is generally stored, which is under the C drive and program files. This is where the app support folder is located for any installed software on the machine. So that malware scan is going to go for a little while now. We're just going to let that happen in the background. It's already detected some objects that it may want to remove. So other than that, once we've removed all of our unnecessary files with disk cleanup, we've checked the disk with disk check, we've done a cleanup, we've removed malware. If we're still running a bit slow, what we might want to do is a disk defragment. Now, what a disk defragment does is look at how the data is currently laid out on the disk, and lay it out maybe a bit more efficiently so it can analyze it and relay that data. Now we can access that through administrative tools as we did before, or once again we click on the specific disk in question, go to tools and go to defragment. Now when Windows lays data on a disk when we're installing software, it tries to group all of that data together, it tries to keep it all the same. So for example, if we're launching a program, Microsoft Word, when it's trying to access all the data or resources it needs for that program, it only has to read specific places. It doesn't have to go all over the place. And that increases the efficiency of the read-write head, which is actually reading a disk at 5,400 revolutions a minute. So you imagine that head is having to jump all over that disk, constantly trying to read data. And if it's placed all over the show, it's going to be hard for it to read it quickly. So imagine data going onto a disk like Tetris. The blocks are laid down as tightly as they can to keep all that data together, but over time that data fragments, it becomes spread all over the show. So defragging picks all of that data up and lays it down like Tetris back where it should be. Running this once every couple of weeks or so will help to keep the hard drive healthy and data all laid together. If we want to just look at how much data is all over the show, or how much room we can free up by running a defrag, we can essentially just analyze the disk. As the disk defragment will take about an hour or so. If you're going to run it, you need to make sure that there is at least an hour free, as well as that disk check. Just be aware that the disk check will take about an hour. So defragmenting that disk is going to put everything close together and free up some space, and this allowing the operating system to be a bit more efficient. We can configure a schedule if we want it to happen regularly. So other than defragging the data, once all of that's done, the computer should be nice, well and house kept and tidied up. The last thing we'd look at doing is maybe stopping files starting when the system starts. That might not be necessary. So things like Dropbox or Adobe Reader updates, QuickTime updates, Skype, or any software really that launches and automatically runs. we can see all of this software is automatically launched and run. And when that computer was running its bootstrap process, it had to think about and process all of that data, giving us a delay between when the computer was ready to use and when it was starting up. So I can see that scan still going. We'll let that happen in the background, and we'll look at disabling some stuff for startup. So to do so, we use an advanced tool, and you can't find this without running it or trying to search from it. So once again, we can search in the start menu, or we type the run, or we can do our Windows R and type in here msconfig. This is the Microsoft config dialog box. This has a few tools built into this dialog box. We can choose to do a selective startup, which can be considered diagnostic, as well as there is a diagnostic startup available and a normal startup. So the diagnostic startup we would use to start the computer and look at which programs are taking what resources and what's not working where and why it's taking so long. So we would run the diagnostic startup to find those problems. Then we would run a selective startup to deselect those problematic software issues from starting when the computer starts, and essentially assess the differences. So if we are having problems with specific software and we do a selective startup choosing not to load it, we can then determine that whether or not the software is the problem, or if we need to disable more software. So when we do a boot, in the boot tab, if we have one disk, it just automatically chooses that boot disk. But if we had multiple disks with multiple installations, this is where we can choose to boot into a different operating system, and maybe choose a different form of booting, like just a text-based boot, command-based boot, just for simplicity. Services are things running on the computer that relate back to software or something like that. So things like a service may be a Minecraft server or something that is constantly serving out to clients. We can check here what's going on in the computer, what the software is doing, and stop it from running if it's taking up unnecessary resources. But let's get down to what we're here for. We're here for the startup. Now what we can do here is look at a list of things that start when the computer starts. These are all things that will try and launch when the computer's launching, and this creating a bit of a lag time where the computer has to process that data. So things that we've already disabled are things like the CCleaner monitoring. That doesn't necessarily need to occur in the background, nor does it need to launch when the computer launches. I'd like to choose that. So we've disabled it here, as well as the Dropbox update, the Google Chrome from starting, Logitech QuickCam software, just unnecessary software, Skype and Dropbox. These are things that would natively open when the computer opens it, but do take a bit of data. So we disable those and effectively get a quicker boot for the computer. So once we've selected those, we hit OK. Now bear in mind you'd need to restart the computer for that to take into effect, as obviously in this startup instance it's already started and loaded those pieces of software. And so we need to restart so that the next time they're started they are loaded. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please see Mr. Burbage or Mr. Leishman. Have a great day.